Recently, I had the absolutely amazing opportunity to try out Duet Night Abyss in their technical test, and I have to say, I had a blast. It has been one of the most fun experiences I've had in the past 2 years, and I have all these things that I want to talk about with the game, so let's get into it. Starting off, let's talk about the story. The story is one of the best things in this technical test, and I love it so far. The world is dark, there's people being enslaved, there's all of these social conflicts going on, and you can't really get involved in certain things because otherwise your character would also be enslaved, and it's just amazing. It's so dark for a gacha game. In most gacha games, they shy away from any sort of dark story techniques for a more PG, kid-safe sort of story. And honestly, it's very refreshing to just have a story that feels more adult in its themes, and it has a lot more going on in that world. It feels like the world building so far is very good, and I'm hoping they keep continuing on in that direction, even though a lot of characters don't necessarily like you, which is, something that got complained about with Wuthering Waves, but, some characters aren't gonna like you. And that is just how it is. And it's great, okay? The story's great. I'm so excited. I'm so excited. Anyways, let's move on to exploration. I think a lot of people thought this was going to be a completely open world, Genshin-like sort of game, but the fact is, it's more like Dark Souls, with the open corridors sort of design. It's not completely open world, but it's not a closed world either. It's a little more open world than something like, say, Honkai Star Rail, but not as open world as Genshin, and there are loading screens between areas, but there's no loading screens if you're in an area and you're going between, say, killing enemies to the city, for example. Along with that, there's also chests and stuff in the open world which you can go and collect, and there's little collectibles in places, there's weapons you can go and find, there's enemies you can kill, there's bosses you can kill. There's a lot of stuff you can still do in the open world, but it's just not as big as, say, something like Genshin. Exploration and bosses isn't the only thing you can do, though. There's also things like commissions and quests at the moment in the game. And there's also things like forging weapons, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Let's start with commissions. You have 7 different commissions, and that's basically your daily energy expenditure. That's how you get level up materials, that's how you get gear, and you do that every day. You have 240 energy, and honestly, they're pretty fun. Talking about gear though, let's stay on that for a little bit, because you have quite a bit of different gearing systems in this game. So you have weapons, which are basically your normal weapons, but you can switch between weapons, and you can get their different animations on any character. You have your characters, which have their own abilities and stuff, and some characters have their own specific weapons which you use with their abilities, which is honestly kind of cool. And then you also have demon wedges, which are basically like this game's version of an artifact system, except it has a point score, and you have to work with your point score basically to build certain characters in certain ways. It's sort of like, how do I put it? Sort of like Wuthering Waves. How they have the amount of points you have to put on a certain amount of artifacts, and then you can choose all of them, and you have to work within that range. One cool thing that demon wedges do though is that they have specific abilities that work better on certain characters, and then you also have certain weapons that have specific effects and stuff. Basically, all of these different elements make it so you have major build variety between your characters, and you can manipulate your characters in a lot of different ways to make them better or, you know, a little worse. Or you can make them faster, jump faster, or you can make them tanky, or you can basically do anything. You can completely manipulate and adjust the game's playstyle to your liking in this game. For example, I played Veronica in this version, and I basically built her completely based off her ult. This allowed me basically to have a constant uptime on her ult and be killing enemies like that. This gearing system basically made it so the combat was completely adjustable to your liking. And talking about combat, man, it's so good. You have so many different options. You have sliding, you have jumping, you have bullet jumping, you have dodging, you have so many options, and most of them have iframes or something of that sort, and it's a very tight game because you can dodge under attacks and you don't get hit, which is so good feeling. You can literally duck under an attack and you don't get hit at all, and that is without an iframe or anything. You just need to time that slide under really well. Anyway, almost got too caught up on the combat there because I love it. But let's talk about the characters a little bit. They had 9 playable characters in the tech test. My 2 favorites, Hilda, Barry, my loves of my life, I tell you. But the characters are all amazing to play, and they feel really good at the moment. I think some adjustments to some characters still need to be made. For example, I didn't really like Yuming that much. He just felt kind of underwhelming, at least at the level I had him. He might have been better than I thought, but as a tank and stuff, he just didn't really feel that great for me. But every other character felt pretty good, especially Barry. Barry felt amazing. I love Barry. But I need to stop going on about Barry. But every character felt good. If you want to play a certain character, I think you can play that character, because I think a lot of the game is very much skill-based. If you are good at the game and if you're good at building characters, you can basically play any character. I just didn't like Yuming that much. I thought he was a little underwhelming compared to the other characters. And there was a few characters like that. For example, Hilda wasn't the best in terms of damage. She felt good mainly because of her animations and how she worked. But in terms of damage, she felt a little underwhelming. But all of the characters aesthetically, on the other hand, they can all... I meant what? Anyway, moving on. Let's talk about some of the issues with the game. Now, there are a few issues. Namely, the biggest issue... Oh my god, the performance was not very good. But to be fair, it is a technical test. Keep in mind, it's a technical test. But the performance was very, very mediocre, and I had to turn down some settings and stuff just to try and make it run better, but that didn't really do too much. And Yeah, the performance wasn't that great, but I think they will fix that later on. So that one's all good in my books. Another one is when I slide, bullet jump, I want to go directly back into a slide if I'm holding down the slide button. I think it would just make the game a lot more fluid and stuff. And another thing is I want them to add a sprint in. A sprint would be very, very nice. Currently, there's just one run, but I think having a sprint and a normal run would just make the game feel more fluid and add an extra bit there where, you know, if you want to sprint, you can sprint. If you want to run, you can run. Just make those two things sort of interlined, have an extra option. Another one, I mentioned this earlier, but I want the first story mission to be a bit longer so we can connect with Berry a bit before she gets taken away. Spoilers, sorry about that. But it's only 40 minutes into the game, so it's not that big of a deal, okay? But I think we should get to connect with Berry a little bit more. This totally isn't just because she's the best waifu ever and I love her. I meant what? Anyways, if we can get a bit more connection with the characters and a bit more time just to get to know them better, I would appreciate that quite a bit. I also know that the game isn't very far into development and the story doesn't have much to it so far. So we definitely probably are going to connect with every single character more. I just would like that first mission to be a bit longer so that ending has more of a emotional impact. Another thing I would appreciate is more options of things to do, more content and stuff, but it is a technical test. There's a limited amount of content. I just would appreciate more replayable content and more stuff to do because, man, I just want to play this game more. That's one thing I can say about this game. If I could have played it more, I would have played it 20 times more. The game is so fun. The game is so fun. It just needs minor tweaks and graphical improvements. For example, putting in shaders and stuff, putting in ray tracing, putting in other things. Just improvements, general improvements over time, which will happen throughout the tests. But for a technical test, this was amazing. And don't get me started on the best part of it all, the music. So good. So freaking good. But yeah, overall, I enjoyed my time playing the game, and this is one of the best starts to a new gacha game I've seen in a very, very long time, especially for a technical test. I've seen much, much worse full games release, and this game is so far beyond any of that. It's such a good start, such an amazing start. And they have so much potential, and I am looking forward to see wherever it goes in the future. Anyway, with all of that said, go pre-register, go tell the devs what you think about the game. If you saw footage of the game, tell the devs what you think, what can be improved. If you played the game a little bit, make sure you tell the devs what you thought of it. And let's make this one of the best gacha games to come out in the next few years because it has the potential. Anyway, like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.